Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a quick debate and discussion about James Gunn and whether he would be the ideal person to lead the DC Cinematic Universe in its current phase or any iteration. Now there'll likely be spoilers within this video for all movies within the DC Cinematic Universe and also for the Peacemaker series, so just beware when you're going into this video. Now you can check out my review of the first season of Peacemaker. Now the idea of James Gunn leading the DC Universe, very much like Zack Snyder did, has really been entertained since the largely positive reaction from the Peacemaker show. Now many viewers found the show very funny and likeable and far more entertaining and brighter than the majority of Snyder's films. And along with James Gunn's success with the Guardians of the Galaxy films, it's been suggested recently that he could bring more adventure and escapism that we'd like to see within the DC films. Now for me, I don't personally feel that James Gunn would be the ideal choice. Not to harm the entire DC universe, I think his tone would suit certain characters, and we can certainly give him credit for finding the right direction in both the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker. His vision for that far more R-rated, hyper-violent and comedic tone works perfectly, I feel, for the more anti-hero or the villain. You know, very much like the Suicide Squad, which, as we all know, these are characters that are criminals who were taken in by the secret government to carry out black op assignments. So we don't look to the characters of the Suicide Squad to be that inspirational hero. They're not characters that we hold to a higher standard. They're far more ambiguous, very much more volatile personalities, and that fits in perfectly with the aesthetic of James Gunn. But in no way possible would James Gunn's tone work for the likes of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman or Aquaman. I feel those heroes are just far too stoic, far too inspirational and impactful, and I think if Gunn was adopting those characters and he was unrestrained in his approach, I think overall his handling would undercut the value and the nature of these characters as what we would associate them with. Now I do think that James Gunn's direction could create an entertaining Green Lantern movie, if of course he adopted the same tone as what we saw with the Guardians of the Galaxy films. That far more brighter, optimistic, non-R-rated tone I think could work very well for a story about Green Lantern, where you have it completely in an outer space adventure. I think possibly for the Flash, I think James Gunn's tone, again, if he stuck more to that family-friendly boundaries in many ways, I think that could work very well for the Flash. You have very much of that oddball mix of characters in terms of his rogues gallery when we look at the likes of Gorilla Grodd and Captain Boomerang and the Top and Mirror Master, and I think again James Gunn could adopt a very suitable tone for a Flash movie. But when we look at the Trinity characters, of course Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman, you need to evoke that sense of awe, that sense of grandeur and gravitas, that impressionism and that certain aura in terms of these characters, especially with Superman, who, yes, of course, you do need that brightness and that charm and that optimism, of course, but I think James Gunn would probably go too far in terms of his comedic sensibilities, and of course his far more R-rated template would be too inappropriate for the characters. Now admittedly, I think James Gunn is very good in creating good chemistry and dynamic within a team. We saw that all with the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker, how he was able to generate a great rapport, very much more of that bickering, dysfunctional camaraderie within a group of characters. So I think James Gunn would definitely inject far more watchability and chemistry within the Justice League members, certainly than what we saw within Zack Snyder's vision. But again, how much would his humour be appropriate for the Justice League? If James Gunn is given complete free reign over these characters, how much would the R-rated tone, especially with its far more racial and sexual and political overtones, and that far more of that toilet humour in many ways, really fit for the Justice League members overall? Now to an extent we saw this with the Peacemaker Season 1 finale, where the Justice League appeared in the penultimate scenes late on arrival to help out Peacemaker's team as they were taking out the butterfly organisms, and we get the exchange of course between Aquaman and Flash about what he likes to do to fish, and this caused certain controversy. Many people are outraged about the certain tone that it gave towards the Justice League. They felt that they were cheapening them and being treated as far more of a joke. It was very much of a flippant, very nonchalant scene overall. But could we handle multiple scenes like that? Imagine scenes very similar where we saw Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman all sharing similar R-rated dialogue and jokes. Now to certain people they would find that very funny, but again that's very much down to your preferred sense of taste, and for me I just don't think that would be completely suitable for certain characters within the DC universe. Now James Gunn would definitely embrace the colours and the tone and the fantasy and very much the bizarreness and the weird elements that we would very much associate with the DC universe. We normally look at the DC universe again as that huge fusion of science and magic and adventure and wonder, and there's no greater example of all of those elements being handled together than looking at the epic Justice League and Justice League animated series. But would James Gunn be able to successfully balance all of those elements with a far more serious and epic narrative that you will certainly need, especially with the DC Cinematic Universe? I just think he would go too far in terms of the humour, which would probably disengage you from the story and you wouldn't be able to take it quite as seriously. And I felt overall this is a primary problem with the Peacemaker series. So taking all of that into consideration, who would be more ideal to be the main visionary of the DC Cinematic Universe if we don't feel it'll be James Gunn, and if we definitely don't feel that it would be Zack Snyder? Well, in my opinion, I think somebody like a Steven Spielberg or a Peter Jackson, I think those type of directors would be able to fuse the large scale and wonder and spectacle with the personality and characterization and the far more brightness and optimistic spirit. I think a prime Robert Zemeckis, who we all know primarily from the Back to the Future films, would also be great for really bringing about that far more escapism and adventure to a Justice League movie. I think if we're going to look at a far more recent choice, the Russo brothers would be a fantastic selection for the DC universe. Of course, we've recently seen in both the likes of Captain America Civil War and Avengers Infinity War how adept the Russo brothers were in providing a huge scale of comic book fervour and imagination, alongside handling a huge ensemble of characters, giving them all standout moments. In particular, we saw how they dealt with the character of Thor, who for me was the best portrayal within Infinity War, where they very much retained the personality that we saw from Thor Ragnarok, but they added far more weight and pathos to the character, as well as giving him perhaps one of the most standout moments within all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe when he arrives on Wakanda and just takes everybody out, really showcasing Thor at his most powerful. We look at Captain America the Winter Soldier, which is far more of a streamlined, very serious standalone story with huge, impactful and serious themes. So once again, the Russo brothers could easily adopt that same kind of tone for a Wonder Woman movie or indeed an Aquaman movie as well. So definitely the Russo brothers would be my pick in terms of helming a DC universe, in terms of handling a huge wave of characters across multiple phases, fusing together standalone movies with, of course, the bigger, larger scale team-up movies. But just going back to James Gunn to close out this overall debate, as I mentioned before, I do feel that he would bring far more of the colour and far more of the brightness and the spirit and very much the weirdness that we would want to associate with DC, but I just think his tone would be too comedic. It would be too flippant and especially too R-rated, again, if he was given completely free reins, and I think his style would suit certain characters, in particular the more anti-heroes, but certainly no way would his tone suit overall the inspirational characters, particularly of your Superman, Batman and Wonder Woman. Certain characters, yes, but not the overall universe as a whole. And as we go on with the DC universe, and what I believe we will eventually see a rebooting with the Flash movie, it will be interesting to see in the next upcoming months and certainly the overall year as to who they will try to adapt in terms of being the overall visionary of the DC Cinematic Universe. Will they go back to a single filmmaker to handle it overall, or will they be far more open to having a group of producers, as what we see with Kevin Feige within the MCU, to operate the universe behind the scenes, and then they could employ various filmmakers and directors to adapt to certain characters? I believe that would be the best way to handle the DC Cinematic Universe, rather than having a single visionary filmmaker at the helm and like a James Gunn. But we will wait and see overall how they decide to handle the universe in the upcoming years. So these are my overall thoughts and feelings and debate on whether James Gunn would be the ideal visionary for a DC Cinematic Universe going forward. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you agree with me and you don't believe James Gunn would be the right man for the job, who do you think would be the most suitable in terms of producing that epic, all-conquering DC Cinematic Universe that we all are so desperate to see? Would you like to see a Steven Spielberg or a Peter Jackson? Do you think the Russo brothers should be selected for the job? If in a hypothetical situation Kevin Feige was given the reins to handle the universe, how successful do you believe he would be in converting these characters? Do you think it would be even bigger than the MCU or even worse than the MCU? Let me know what you think in the comments. Please also hit and like the subscription button so I can provide you with more high commentary like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay in safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.